So just a reminder to anyone that's recently joined that we're recording this session. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining us. If you're not a member of the staff team or on the board, if you want to turn your camera off, then that helps us with bandwidth. And if you want to go on mute, that's really helpful for sound as well. But you can use the chat box for Q&A. So please go ahead and pop any questions or comments or responses into the chat box. Thanks.
I think we've got 25 people here now. We just after 4 o'clock. So I think if everybody's okay, we'll just commence. So I think first of all, I'm Allan Dick. I chair the Board of Trustees of Engage Renfrewshire. And the first thing I would like to do is obviously to welcome you all to the 9th annual general meeting of Engage Renfrewshire. We are in different circumstances than in previous years, and I was reflecting, not quite the same day, but the same week. We were in Linwood last year, and obviously previously in Paisley and in Renfrew, and had met in person. But it's absolutely fantastic that everybody's been able to join us this afternoon. We can't provide refreshments and live music and entertainment as we've done in previous years, but I'm sure it will be no less an enjoyable afternoon for the lack of that. The proceedings will be in 3 parts this afternoon. First of all, we are going to have a presentation from Frances Burns. We'll then move into the more formal part of the AGM. We will get through that as easily and as simply as possible, and during that Laura Lawson from our accountants, Martin and Aitken, will give an overview of the accounts, and then we'll finish off as we do in every AGM with Allan McNiven giving a review of the year just past, and then the outlook for the year ahead. So if everybody is comfortable with what's going to be happening, the first thing I would like to do is to hand over to Frances Burns, who's obviously a well-kent face in Renfrewshire, Head of Strategic Planning and Health Improvement at the Health and Social Care Partnership. And she is going to do a small presentation with an opportunity for some questions. If you can use the chat facility to raise any questions for Frances, and she will look to answer them at the end of her presentation. So with no further ado, I will hand over to Frances. Thank you.
Thanks, Allan. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
And just to say thank you to Allan McNiven and the team for inviting me along, but also genuinely for their support in what's been my first year as Head of Service for Strategic Planning, and what a year it has proved to be. Anyway, I'd also like to thank you for inviting me along, because it's about a subject that I do feel really passionately about. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to speak to you today. Karen, the slides. Yeah, is it not moving? Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you about today is why Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership feel that the voluntary sector has such a pivotal role to play in our recovery and our future sustainability. And what I'm going to touch upon is some of my reflections from the current COVID crisis, also just some of the challenges and uncertainties that we're both facing, why in the face of the role of us working together in partnership is so pivotal, and just highlight some of the progress that actually we've already made working with Allan and the Engage team and our partners pre-COVID, and then just touch on some of the additional opportunities that I think that are out there for us to work with the voluntary sector going forward. So what have we learned from our COVID response to date? Karen, the next slide. Yeah, but in Renfrewshire, our fantastic COVID response didn't really surprise me. Every day I just see so much passion, commitment and the values within our third sector, our volunteers, our community groups and among public sector officers. What I do think is that COVID actually just brought out the best in us, where we all came together with a focus on our shared values around how we can do the best for the people of Renfrewshire. And I think the progress that we made in our ability to respond so well was assisted by the foundation that we already had in place locally, the excellent relationships that we've got with our communities and our growing relationship with each other. This really allowed us to quickly mobilise our response, and for the HSCP that meant being able to really quickly work with partners to establish with the hospices a bereavement network, to work with people like RAMH to get really vital help in place for mental health and anxiety. So the relationships that we had were just so important during this time. Also, as a commissioner, this reminded us in the HSCP the importance of who's best to do the job. And it's not always the HSCP. It puts a real value on outcomes and making sure that we have the right outcome rather than that the HSCP delivers those services. And I think also our COVID response has validated the partnership approach that the voluntary sector engaging ourselves have been taking to date, mainly through our strategic planning group, and more importantly now, given the many challenges that we're facing. And in terms of challenges, most of the ones that I'm going to present will sadly be all too familiar to you as the board. Even before COVID, we were facing a really tough environment, and COVID has exacerbated a number of these challenges. In the HSCP, we already were facing significant financial constraints, and COVID has added uncertainty to that. And that's without even mentioning the Brexit word. And this is also showing, this strain is also showing in our providers, both in the public sector, in the voluntary sector, but also in the private sector, where they're increasingly and rightly worried about their sustainability. And we need to look at the HSCP's, the uncertainty in our financial position that adds to that, our increasing requirement to do one-year budgets, and often many of the services that we fund in the voluntary sector are funded through non-recurring money, which just adds to that uncertain picture. And this financial picture is set against growing demand year on year, and COVID has just added to this, with growing health inequalities, which we have seen hitting Renfrewshire across some of our most poor groups, disproportionately affected by COVID. But also through COVID, we've actually seen new demand and expect that to increase through the effects of unemployment, the impact of COVID on people's mental health and loneliness and isolation. And we've got to remind ourselves we're actually already still in the midst of fighting COVID. We're still doing a response. Karen, can you go back to the last slide? Where our COVID response and recovery is not a linear process. As we've seen from recent outbreaks, we're continuing to still provide services for test and protect. We're providing testing centres, and this will become exacerbated as winter approaches. And winter is going to bring a number of constraints, not just for the HSCP, for our partners. We've been really creative in the way that we've delivered services against physical constraints and restrictions about working indoors in line with the guidance. But given the Scottish climate, we're going to find that increasingly difficult. And also we can just expect that people will start to struggle more as winter goes on and the effects of lockdown take their toll. And then just finally, I guess there's the continual challenge of genuinely shifting the balance of care, which has been something that the partnership has been challenged with since since integration was established, and it's just recognising that we still haven't managed to shift meaningfully resource from hospitals into the community. So given these challenges, I really believe from the conversations that I'm having with our public sector partners and Engage, that we are recognising in the face of these challenges that there is no option but to work together as a collective for greater impact. And in the HSCP, we truly value the contribution that the third sector can make. Their work and their ethos really aligns with our aims. That's to keep people in the community, an increasingly community-led approach, but also to work with people upstream to reduce the increasing demand in our services and change that cycle of increasing demand for statutory services. And on the screen, I don't plan to go through them, but I've just highlighted some of the values that I really feel that the voluntary sector bring to the table if we can work in partnership with them. Next slide. So looking back at my first year in post, I really feel that the last year we've laid the foundations for change, and I'm just going to highlight some of the work that we've done. This slide just quickly illustrates the HSCP's approach. This approach was established pre-COVID as part of our transformation programme, working with our partners, where we had two strands of activity. One strand putting the focus at our strategic planning group and working with our partners on our Renfrewshire-wide approach to community health and wellbeing. So pre-COVID, we already had the conversations with our partners that unless we all work together around health and wellbeing and shifting the balance of care, we would not be able to do it. It required a partnership approach. And that's not changed with COVID. In fact, I think it's just been, that approach has just been validated by what we've seen. Karen, next slide. So just to highlight some of the progress that we've made to date, and this has really been a partnership approach, working with Engage and many of our voluntary sector partners. I genuinely feel that we're starting to see true partnership working, and most importantly, relationships developing, a growing trust. And this has principally been done by through our strategic planning group, which is now becoming an invaluable resource, and actually, as you see, is central to the HSCP's plans for recovery and renewal. And I think we're also starting to see the conversations becoming honest and getting down to actually finding solutions to some of the long-standing issues. And there is what can we do rather than what we can't do at the front of our minds. And I'm certainly deriving real benefit from the new group that we've established, which Karen from Engage is the facilitator of, where the HSCP are meeting on a regular basis with some of our voluntary sector partners to discuss some of the challenges around partnership working, commissioning, and the real local issues that we need to get to grips with. One of the big achievements of the last year has actually been the strategic planning group working together to identify shared priorities. So looking at where we can collectively bring the greatest impact to the people of Renfrewshire, recognising that it's such a huge task to improve population health. And in this task, our voluntary sector partners are taking the leadership role, where we have for each of these priorities people from different organisations advising the HSCP and leading other partners around how we deliver on these, because they're the specialists in this area and best placed to do this work. And the HSCP is going to commit to funding the successful proposals. Yeah. So this slide just shows the priorities that we've identified, and I don't plan to go through them, but there is a seventh priority that I would highlight, which is not a specific health or social care priority. It's more a collective commitment about how can we collaborate for greater impact. And the HSCP and Engage are collectively leading on this priority to look at what's the value, how are we greater than the sum of the parts, and how can we work together looking ahead. Which leads me to my final slide. So where do we go from here? What are the opportunities? And in my opinion, I see so much potential for us going forward. And I just wanted to finish with highlighting some of the areas where I feel that we could make a difference. I think there's a real opportunity to lift the health and social care agenda up to a community planning partnership level, where given the sort of wider socio-economic impacts and sort of determinants of health, I think it would really merit a wider review of and shared priorities at that level and investment in resource. Critically, I think we need to do more to capture all the great work that's out there and make sure people know about it, particularly those that are maybe new to having to use our services in light of COVID. Knowledge is power. We can have excellent services out there, but if the right people don't know how to get them and they're not easy to access, it's futile. So we need to work together. And that work, I think, can also really help us with actually doing some horizon scanning and looking at gaps in potentially what we're offering, and also potentially duplication, where we could lead to much more effective market facilitation to help guide both our private and our voluntary sector in the right direction, working together, so we can actually have the right services in the right place at the right time. And I think increasingly that is going to be a really dynamic area that we need to keep on top of. I also continue to stress the importance of moving resources upstream, and we need to look at how we do that and how we get investment in the voluntary sector and upstream, which we know is the right thing to do, but it can be difficult to get investment where we only see benefits when the child becomes an adult or in later years. But unless we invest now, we're going to just keep creating the cycle of increasing demand for our statutory services. I think we must continue the positive conversations that we're already having with our voluntary sector partners about what's possible, shared messaging, the strength of potentially looking at how we brand this work together, not to dilute others' brand, but actually to promote it and have consistent messaging and conversations with the public. And also, I think there's a real opportunity, rather than looking at internally at the same funding, actually using the strength of our partnership and strategic alignment to attract greater funding to Renfrewshire, to sell what we can do to really improve, and that we have a collaborative approach to invest that money. And in the HSCP, for me, going forward into the next year, I really feel that we need to exploit the agility and the community insight that's in the voluntary sector that the HSCP don't always have, and we have different constraints in the way that we work. I think we need to look at how we can be within the constraints that we're working more responsive and flexible in the way that we do procurement and contracts, with a much more outcomes focused base, rather than some of the detail that actually proves a constraint for all of us and doesn't have the person at the centre of it. I'm really committed to looking at co-production and how we can actually move to a real joint commissioning model. And just finally, by just saying that I think we need to be really proud of all the work that we're doing locally and share each other's work to promote it, because I think there's a lot to be proud of in Renfrewshire. And happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Frances. That was excellent, and I think a great view of just how important the collaboration between the voluntary sector and the statutory sector is, and how important that's going to be going forward. Karen, are there questions coming through the chat?
Just a couple of comments. Susan MacDonald has said she would echo the thoughts about great partnership and collaborative work developing across the SPG and partners. And a wee personal note, well done for your first year in post, Francis. Jackie's commented that the SPG is gaining momentum. Sorry for the jargon, the SPG is the Strategic Planning Group, which sits below the Integrated Joint Board. Janice has her hand raised. Janice, would you like to ask a question? Janice McGuinness, are you there?
Sorry, it's my...
Oh, hello. You're not Janice at all.
It's my alter ego. That's my wife's name. We're going Janice McGuinness. I said I know that person. I had to go on using her iPad. Apologies. Listen, I really enjoyed the presentation and your slide at the outset about Harry Truman and people not taking credit, I guess is right. And we see that's, I think that's part of the kind of response to the pandemic and I guess national emergency. But as time passes and I kind of sense that people lose and are losing that sense of urgency. And so how do we foster that collaboration that has and was been driven by the kind of pandemic? What type of changes do we need to make to our approaches to sustain that collaboration when, I guess, we'll not say we're over the worst of it because that's patently obvious, but I think it's how we maintain that kind of spirit of just everybody kind of getting behind the kind of common cause.
Thanks, Gordon. Yeah, over to you, Francis. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that is always a challenge, and I think, being honest, there is always a degree of exhaustion, and after everybody raising their game for a pandemic, and it's how you keep that sustained. But I think, as I mentioned earlier, locally we've put so many of those foundations already in place with the groups that we've got, the strategic planning group, that this wasn't just a COVID response. I genuinely feel there was a commitment in place to work together pre-COVID, and COVID really tested that and demonstrated that actually there was a benefit to working together rather than in silos. I'm hoping that through the introduction of the shared priorities that we've identified through the strategic planning group and the investment that the HSCP is putting forward in the coming months leading up to Christmas, that will create some momentum where we'll be agreeing how we're going to take those forward, the work that we're going to do, and sharing our experience of that. I also think that through the public messaging and branding, if we can get that brand, then I think there's an energy that comes from sharing the stories, the successes, not just with the public, but with each other around the impact and the good work that we're doing, because the impact of COVID is going to last and be seen for the years to come, sadly.
Thank you.
And a small note from Ian at Bridgewater, a personal note, a fantastic job during the past year, Francis, and that he says there's much to be proud of in the way that people have come together to work collaboratively, and the SPG is a much more valuable resource than it has been in the past, which is a terrific achievement. Allan McNiven, did you have a question?
I don't have a question. I wanted to bring in Anne McMillan. Anne McMillan has a question from one of our directors.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, Francis. You've done really well in your first year. My goodness, it's looked like an awful lot of work that you've had to do, and very well too. I just, in a way, COVID has brought a lot of real challenges, but in a way, the opportunity is that it's from a national perspective, it's directed a lot of attention towards the care sector and how that's delivered. And I just wondered if there'd been a discussion of what you feel about the implication would be of a kind of development of a national care service that's been talked about, sitting alongside what's delivered just now, which is a lot of, I suppose, a mixed economy of the provision, whether it's the private sector or public, the public sector, voluntary sector and so on, and charitable sector indeed. I just wondered if that's something that's on the horizon or not.
I think the announcement of the social care review has, I guess, there's twofold. It's added another degree of uncertainty in terms of the time of planning, where in January, as we're just getting to grips with our recovery and renewal programme and our transformation, things could change again. However, I think one of the learnings and benefits that have come out of COVID, and certainly I've sat in lessons learned with the Scottish Government and the Council and the NHS, has certainly been the recognition of the social care sector, which sadly was not there at the beginning of this pandemic, and it was pretty evident a lot of the focus on NHS heroes for cards and for T-shirt, even get access to supermarkets wasn't available to other people that were helping as part of the resource. So I think anything that would promote that and also acknowledge some of the salary implications for those that are less paid doing some of the most demanding jobs. So I think that's very welcomed. But in terms of the more mixed economy and how that work out, we've not been close to the detail of that at all at this stage.
Thanks, Frances. That was really, really interesting. Thank you.
I don't think I've missed anything in the chat box, but Kate can keep me right.
I think you're okay. Karen, I would just like to echo if it's okay, Chair, just to echo all the thanks to Frances for the presentation, and really to note my own, I suppose, satisfaction, to a degree that we really start to see a kind of way that the members within the third sector locally in Renfrewshire have come together within the construct of health and social care. This isn't an easy ask, I don't think, at all, because we're talking about different cultures, public sector from the local authority and health coming together, and then bringing in the third sector as well as another culture. So these are kind of difficult things, I think, to work within. But I think in the last 12 months or so, there's been a real bit of drive, and I think some of the members who are now leading some of the issues for the SPG, it's just great to see organisations like Active and ROAR and RAMH all taking leadership roles within that construct. So for me, the last year out with the COVID response has been very successful. So thanks, Frances.
You're welcome, and thanks, Allan. Allan was one of the first people I went to speak to when I thought about going for the job, because the voluntary sector and how we would work in partnership was one of the biggest priorities and areas that I felt I would need to work on when I came in to post. So I would just extend my gratitude to both him and Karen for facilitating a lot of the initial discussions and supporting me in my role. So thanks, but a lot of work still to do, as you can all see, but I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Frances, thank you very much for that presentation, and I think reflected in the comments from everybody the fantastic partnership that is there. So well done for year one and for many years ahead. Thank you. We can now move on to the more formal part of the afternoon and the formal AGM business. So the first thing is I just want to say a few words from myself. And usually at this point when I'm standing up in a room and somewhere in Renfrewshire, I brandish a copy of the annual report. So unfortunately, I can still brandish one here in front of me, but hopefully you have all got one there. And as in previous years, I'm delighted again to present this annual report to the members and to everybody here, because again it does capture the work of Engage Renfrewshire and the significant achievements over the last year in all areas of activity, be it volunteering, community engagement, social enterprise, and our work with the community planning partnership. Everything has developed, everything has grown, and has done that having faced many challenges across the year, not least obviously the impact of COVID on the company and on the communities and across the whole country. And I think it's at this point, I just like to say, I think it's was a fantastic effort by everybody in the company and in many other organisations who, in the space of literally a week, was able to transfer its operations from bricks and mortar to an online delivery of their operations with no glitches along the way. So I think that's a fantastic effort was made, and I must commend the whole organisation for doing that. Although it was a change of style and a change of method, the basic principles of Engage remained the same throughout the last year, and particularly from March. The demands on the organisation to deliver services and support communities under the restrictions that COVID has created were met head on and have been very well delivered, and have provided great support not just to the local communities and to organisations, but also the great partners and collaboration with the community planning partners in the overall Renfrewshire response. So I think a great credit needs to go to Allan and the team for being able to do that. Throughout the whole period, though, the organisation continues to develop and grow the network of members and partners, and that's integral to the outcomes for Engage Renfrewshire. The building of relationships will have happened previous to COVID, will happen post-COVID, and have continued to develop during this recovery position that we're in. The company's engagement work aims to ensure that all members are involved, are aware of the policies and changes to operation that's impacting on them, and gives them an opportunity to be involved in both the implementation and the development of services across our area. So I think, again, commend the annual report to everybody. It's a good read. It highlights great achievements of the organisation, but also reflects upon the impact of the last 6 months and how the company has dealt with the pandemic and the impact of it. I'd just like to finally just say on behalf of my fellow directors, just to say, pay tribute and to thank all the staff for their hard work, enthusiasm and achievements, not least that change from bricks and mortar, being in the office, to working at home. Everybody has taken on that responsibility with good humour, not least, and got over the IT glitches that happen from occasion. But also like to extend that thanks to the volunteers that work with Engage, and all to the members who have supported the work of the company throughout the last year and have made a significant contribution. So thank you for that. The next point on the agenda is just to confirm the minute of the last AGM, and if the fellow directors of Engage can just confirm that that is an accurate account of the last AGM from last year.
That's me,
agree, Alan.
You agree, Gordon? Thank you. We will take that as an accurate record. Thank you. The next point, and a key part of the AGM, is for you to get an overview of our accounts for 1920. and I'm going to hand over to Laura Lawson of Martin and Aitken, who are accountants, to take you through that. If I can just point you in the direction of the annual report, and on the second last page, there is a summary of the accounts, on which Laura will take us through the main points. So if I can hand over to Laura, thank you.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, Laura, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Laura Lawson, the Audit Manager at Martin Aitken and Company. Mark McRae, the Audit Partner, passes on his apologies for not being able to attend today, but he's actually on holiday this week. This year's audit has been somewhat unusual because the company's year-end effectively coincided with the national lockdown due to COVID, and consequently the audit work has not been able to be carried out on site, but instead was undertaken electronically. And although this has been challenging, thanks to the excellent cooperation we've received from Jacqueline Carroll and her team, we have been able to obtain all the information and explanations required for our audit purposes. As part of our audit work, we review the procedures and controls that are in place to assess whether the accounting systems are appropriate for ensuring that the financial information provided to us for audit purposes shows a true and fair view of the entity's financial position. And I can confirm that our work did not identify any material weaknesses in the accounting or internal control system that we'd wish to draw to your attention. Engage Renfrewshire is the parent undertaking of Childcare First, and consequently the statutory accounts that will be submitted to Companies House will be the accounts which consolidate the results of both entities. However, today I'm only discussing the accounts of Engage as an individual entity, and that is what is shown on this screen. We will be issuing an audit report confirming that, in our opinion, the financial statements show a true and fair view of the charity's financial position and result for the year, and confirming that the accounts have been prepared in accordance with applicable accounting standards. As auditors, we also require to assess whether we concur with the view of the trustees that an entity will have sufficient funds to pay its liabilities as they fall due for a period of 12 months from the date the accounts are signed, and report on whether we consider the entity to be a going concern. And as is the case for most audits that we're undertaking this year, in light of the uncertainties caused by the ongoing COVID pandemic, going concern is the area of most concern to auditors. And therefore, I want to draw your attention to an issue which has arisen this year purely as a consequence of the pandemic. As Engage is dependent on receiving grant funding to retain its going concern status, and due to the general uncertainties caused by the ongoing pandemic and the economic effects thereof, we require this year to include a paragraph in the audit report indicating that these issues may indicate the existence of a material uncertainty that may cast doubt on the company's ability to continue as a going concern. And although this sounds somewhat ominous, we are not aware of any particular issues which would suggest that funding will not be forthcoming for 21 and 22. And therefore we agree with the trustees' decision that the going concern basis of accounts preparation is appropriate. And therefore, although we have been required to make this statement in our audit report, we have not actually modified our audit opinion in respect of this matter. As you can see from the accounts extract, they highlight that the charity remains to be in a healthy financial position again this year. The income for the year is £673,000 in comparison to the expenditure of £642,000, and there is net income for the year of £31,000. As is required by the charity's statement of recommended practice, all income and expenditure requires to be allocated between unrestricted and restricted funds. Hence the reason why there are different columns appearing on the face of the statement of financial, activities. The difference between restricted and unrestricted funds is that restricted funds have stipulations placed on the use of the funds by the donors, whereas unrestricted funds can be used by the trustees for whatever charitable purpose they see fit. Regarding the income, approximately 90% of the income is restricted funds, and it includes the annual grant funding from Renfrewshire Council of £360,000 and the Scottish Government £198,000. And in addition, this year, the charity received £36,000 from the Big Lottery Community Fund and £10,000 from SCVO for 2 specific projects. Unrestricted funding has decreased by 13% from last year, and unrestricted funding consists mainly of rental income and the fees that are earned from accounting and payroll services. Expenditure has increased from £618,000 last year to £642,000 this year. As has been the case in prior years, the main expenditure relates to staff costs, and these have increased by £24,000 from last year to £495,000. But the majority of this increase actually relates to an accounting adjustment required in respect of the defined benefit pension scheme, rather than relating to increased salaries to staff. The overall impact of income and expenditure is that net income for the year is £31,000, which is £9,000 higher than last year. You will note then in the statement of financial activities, there is a line that's actuarial gains and losses on defined benefit pension schemes of £22,000, which increases the income of the charity, and I'll discuss that very shortly. Regarding the balance sheet, net assets have increased from £640,000 last year to £693,000 this year. And the main points of note on the balance sheet are that debtors have increased. This is mainly due to the timing of receipts from clients, and we have reviewed the debtors at the year end, and we're satisfied that there's no bad debts of note. The cash at bank figure remains healthy at £672,000, being only £3,000 lower than the prior year. And creditors are £31,000 lower than last year at £34,000, but this was due to last year's creditors, including funds that were managed on behalf of another charitable organisation of £30,000, and these funds have been fully distributed to eligible organisations in the current year. Excuse me. If you look at the bottom of the balance sheet, you will see that the funds are split between general funds, designated funds and restricted funds. £39,000 of the funds relate to restricted funds, and this relates mainly to the £36,000 received from the Big Lottery Community Fund, which was to assist in the creation of a new bodies integration project, because with the exception of £505 of that, the balance of that funding is being carried forward at the balance sheet date and will be utilised in the coming year. You will also note that there are unrestricted funds of £654,000, and these have been allocated between general and designated funds. A designated fund is a fund which has been placed in reserve by the trustees to meet future specified costs or projects. And of this amount, £580,000 of the funds have been designated as follows. There is a redundancy reserve of £189,000 to cover the cost of redundancies if the company was to be wound up. There's a capital reserve of £20,000 to cover the costs of future property improvements, a digital reserve of £20,000 to cover the costs of further IT and digital upgrades, and finally there is a pension reserve of £350,000. Now, with regard to the pension scheme, there is nothing that appears on the balance sheet in respect of the pension scheme. Engage participates in the Strathclyde Pension Scheme, which is a defined benefit pension scheme, and we are required to prepare accounts in accordance with Financial Reporting Standard 102, which requires a company to obtain a report each year from the scheme actuaries to highlight the value of the scheme assets and liabilities at the balance sheet date, and therefore that indicates the scheme surplus or deficit at that date. And as at 31 March 2020, the report showed that the scheme had an FRS 102 surplus of £563,000, which compared to a surplus last year of £501,000. So there's an increase in the surplus of £62,000. Under FRS 102, you can only show a surplus on your balance sheet if it is likely that the surplus will be able to be recovered through reduced contributions going forward or through refunds from the plan. And as neither of these events will arise, as has been the case in prior years, the surplus has been curtailed and the pension position has been reflected in the balance sheet at nil. The actuarial report had reflected actuarial gains due to changes in demographic assumptions, financial assumptions, changes in interest rates amounting to 84,000, and the curtailment of 62,000 has then been offset against this. The net amount of £22,000 is then reflected in the statement of financial activities, and when added to the net income for the year of 31,000, gives the net movement in funds for the year of £53,000. Although the scheme reflects a surplus under FRS 102, the trustees are aware that this is likely to be a short-term position and that the overall trend in pension schemes in the medium to long term is likely to be one of increasing liabilities. Consequently, in prior years, the trustees considered it prudent to set up a designated pension reserve of £350,000 and have retained the reserve at this level again this year to absorb any future fluctuations in value. I'd be happy to take any questions anybody has on the accounts or on the audit process in general.
Thank you, Laura. If there's anybody who wants to ask a question, if you can pop it in chat or raise your hand and Karen or somebody will spot it. If not, I think that's a reflection on a very comprehensive review, Laura, and also the very healthy position that the finances are in at this stage. So if there are no further questions, can I just thank you, Laura, for your presentation today, but also to you and your colleagues for the work over the last year with us, and in particular in undertaking the audit and production of the accounts in these unusual circumstances. And hopefully we're back to normal for next year, and we can welcome you back to Falcon Crescent and see you in person.
That would be great.
You're very welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I fully understand if you need to go. That's great. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
The next part of the agenda is with regards to the election and re-election of directors. I'm going to hand over to Mr. McNiven for this part, as I have to stand down at this stage. Allan.
Thank you, Chair. Just in accordance with the Articles of Association of Engaged Renfrewshire, actually at this point 2 directors are retiring. That's Billy Clark, who's an individual member director, and Allan Dick, who's public-private member director. The above 2 directors have indicated their desire to be re-elected. No group member director election is required this year due to the standing down of Helen Simpson, and Jackie Smart joined the board as a new member. However, in addition, as co-opted directors, Helen Simpson joined us, and Allan is our other co-opted director. Both of them stand down today, but they will be invited to rejoin as co-opted members at our next board. In the vote to re-elect Billy Clark as an individual member director, all votes cast electronically prior to the meeting have been counted, and therefore by a majority vote, Billy Clark is re-elected to the Board of Engage. And in the vote to re-elect Allan Dick as public-private member director, all votes cast electronically prior to the meeting have been counted, and therefore by majority vote, Allan Dick is re-elected to the Board of Engaged Renfrewshire. And at this time, I'll hand back to the chair, who is Allan Dick at this point, to take over the meeting and to continue as chair of Engage. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and delighted to continue, and delighted that all our directors are re-elected and be re-co-opted at this time. The final part of the formal process is just the date of the next AGM, which will occur at some date in September 2021. That concludes the formal part of the meeting, so I thank you for your patience through that. And then the final part of this afternoon, as I said at the beginning, is maybe the most important part of the afternoon, where our Chief Executive, Allan McNiven, will have a review of the year past and a bit of an outlook on the year ahead. So no further ado, Allan, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. I really I feel for Karen McIntyre, who's going to have to manually move these slides on. So I thought what I'll do is I'll just come up with a kind of thumbs up, Karen, when I want the slide to move forward, if that's okay. And as usual, in my lazy Glaswegian-ish style, I'll probably go too fast and stuff. So forgive me if we get lost in amongst it, and we'll just busk it, as they say. Okay. I think that probably the first thing to say is that this is an unusual AGM. There's no doubt about that. It's in some respects we're working with a new set of governance rules that Oscar and others are almost allowing charities to work virtually, because in no way does most people's memorandum and articles of association say virtual AGM, because that's something that probably we never really considered when these things are being produced. So we're in a bit of a new world in some respects. And you're also in a wee bit of a new world in that I need to stay in frame. I'm very aware that when I present normally an AGM, I'm pointing at things and sort of wandering about and talking about the pies and talking to the choir we've got in the room. And I kind of miss that. I miss that opportunity to actually see our AGM as a bit of a celebration. But hopefully those who have participated today, particularly with the input of Francis, will recognise there is things to be celebrated, even though we're going through an incredibly difficult time. I've just seen a note there popping up from Sharon Macaulay of Star saying, missing those wee pies. And we have had that fed back to us a number of times, that we're engaged tends to do a decent pie. So I will try and contain, as I say, my wanderings, and if I wander into the other room, forgive me. The first thing I want to maybe start by saying is that we should definitely thank the board of directors as a group of staff, because without the directors, like all charities, without a good governance support from your directors, you're going to struggle. And I've genuinely been absolutely blessed throughout the period of engaged to have some really amazing support on our board. So I'll say that to start with. I also need to remember to say, and I'm quite clear about this, that we've just looked at the accounts, and the ongoing support of Scottish Government and the local authority in Renfrewshire is obviously absolutely fundamental to us in terms of how we operate. Although we do some trading, I'll talk about that. Having those two funds coming in from Scottish Government and local authority are obviously fundamental to keeping engaged, operating the way it does. So my thanks to the funders as well. Karen. So I always try and start with these presentations by talking about what a third sector interface is, because ultimately we do find ourselves talking in this world, or these worlds that we inhabit in terms of partnership and a lot of abbreviations, but we are a TSI, we're a third sector interface. We provide a single point of access for support and advice for the third sector within the local area. That's what we aim to do. And we also look to provide a strong and coherent and cohesive representation of the third sector with clear links to community planning partnerships. It's mentioned there about the Health and Social Care Partnership. That is part of community planning. So we tried to summarise that using a bit of a brand manifesto. How trendy are we? Over the last year, we've started to use quite clear statements of what we do. We help charities and community groups to be well managed, well resourced, well represented and well connected. Within that construct, there's obviously some major themes that we work with. Volunteering, of course, and I think obviously the last 6 months has proven, Scottish, UK, worldwide level, how important volunteering is to communities, how important volunteering is to keeping society fit, operation, you know, and I'll say a wee bit more of that as we go through. Social enterprise, which is just business with a social purpose. We've got some great people looking at that and promoting that every minute, every day. Community capacity, we're interested in the benefits that building community capacity brings in terms of keeping services operational. Partnership working, of course, which takes up an awful lot of my day. Financial services, and then we've got our building, which we know at the moment is closed to the public. But what I can guarantee is over the last few while we've been working and making sure that our building will be fit for purpose when we get the green light to go again. It is non-essential office space, and we can do a lot from home, but we want to be back. We want to be back working from our space, just like many other organisations feel the same way, I'm sure. And we, as I say, are getting that. The building will be ready when we switch on. Okay. So in our hub, not only does it house us, it houses a number of partners that we're always delighted to have and working with us. West College Scotland Learning Centre is there. West College are our biggest partner. They take up the most space apart from myself, along with our Prince's Trust group as well. The Renfrewshire Access Panel, who obviously support disability issues locally, they're also a third-party reporting agent, so that gives us opportunity to act in that way. The Scottish Football Association, the West Region officers, who it always feels a bit odd because the Scottish Football Association obviously is a private entity, but they take space from us, which brings in a wee bit of income for the hub. But more importantly, it brings those officers in, those West Region officers who've got great community connections. And some of the sort of connections we've made with them has been really fantastic. Actually, they're a great bunch of folk. Although they do eat a lot of biscuits, so we've always got to be careful of them, you know. And then there is Quarriers as well who have joined us, and they're delivering 2 services from the spaces. All of those organisations during the last 6 months have worked really well with us. They've been able to access the building in a very managed way, but everybody understands the situation we're in, and we're all keeping in communication with one another, making sure we support one another as partners. Okay. I mentioned that we do a bit of trading. Now, the biggest bit of trading, other than actually our hub, is our financial support services, led by Jacqueline Carroll, who heads up finance for the company. And obviously, we just had a great report there from Laura, and it's Jacqueline who gives the overview on that, and her team that does the support. Our team, Francis and Amy and Darren, and then I'm going to miss one, Rachel, of course, do a brilliant job throughout the year of working with lots of people who are looking for support for their finances. One of the things that we're really keen on is that we remove the anxieties and complications felt by a new employer. If you're setting up your own care for self-directed support, for example, taking on a member of staff is a really difficult thing, and our team work really hard to try to support the individuals who are dealing with that. We've got about 80 individual clients who employ 165 staff. We also support organisations from our own membership, 27 of those who employ 125 staff. And that's approximately £3 million per annum we are managing a payroll throughout the year, and that's jumped quite considerably in the last year. And it mentions here just in the slide, we do this idea of working closely with individuals to remove the anxieties is one of the key drivers. So I want to say thanks to the finance team because they did an amazing job. And taking finances out of the office and onto the kitchen tables was, it was a bit panicky, you know, but it worked well, and it's now in place and running really smoothly. So thanks. Mentioned volunteering. We look to build a strong culture of volunteering that strengthens local organisations, enhances health and promotes life opportunities. So I'll just put my thumb up there, right? So in the last year, Alice McBride, some of you have met Alice, she has joined us, and she's led a wee bit of a sort of change of how we've operated, and we've moved to quite a kind of digital format, and I'll maybe say a wee bit of that as we go through. But over the last year, over 1,000 people have registered to volunteer in Renfrewshire. Now that's with Engage. That's not all of the volunteers in Renfrewshire. That's just those who are new registrations at Engage. And we know lots of our members take on their own volunteers and are with them for years and everything else. So there's many more volunteers, but that's our number who registered with us. And there was 51 new opportunities available to those new registrations. But in the last 6 months, of course, we've seen a huge influx of volunteers. wanting to support the COVID response. There was a national campaign called Scotland Cares, and when that was paused, those volunteers moved on to our digital system. As I've mentioned that Alice led on with the support of Karen McIntyre, our manager. There was 796 volunteers came through that programme, and there was 422 referrals to roles from those 796 volunteers over that 6-month period. So you can see that's quite a significant growth. In Renfrewshire, we were in the top 10 of people registering to support their local communities, and I think that's something to be applauded. There's a few quotes here that haven't really come out very well, as you can see, because we're looking at the slide and it's not running, so forgive me, right? These are a few quotes from volunteers who were involved in that COVID response. Now, I don't want to read them all out and bore you all, but reality, what a lot of people are saying is how much it benefited them. So I think this thing about, you know, volunteering to actually make yourself feel better, as well as doing a bit for your community, is a really important factor. And I like that one there, on the crisis. It will bring neighbours closer together and help people reach out when they need help most. So we need to kind of cling on to that, I think. It's been a crisis, it's still ongoing, we're still seeing some impacts, but there's some real strong benefits coming through, and that people see how important community can be. We support social enterprise startup. As I said, this idea that social enterprise, business with a social purpose, we don't pay directors, we just basically run our business and we put the money back into the business to bring more social benefit. Other way, I think, Cam. I think you went back one. Brilliant. Many of you will know Ian, and Ian has you know, been around since the start of time. I say that knowing he's the same age as me, but he's been in Renfrewshire and knows most things in Renfrewshire better than most. And he leads a lot of support to social enterprises, but I wanted to just concentrate a wee bit on the corporate social responsibility work he's done over the last number of years, which is growing, and the relationship with the local authority that's made that happen. There's some outcomes here. 38 contractors have provided 69 community benefits. There was 26 non-financial benefits delivered. That means not just wee bits of money given to organisations, that's people going in and doing things like laying tarmac and everything else. In the last 6 months, there was 400 items of PPE delivered to local organisations from that corporate social responsibility, and a number of social enterprise development workshops. And there was 43 community benefits that delivered £69,000 in financial benefits as well, all through that corporate social responsibility. And I bring that up because we've got a good relationship there. As Ian sits on the procurement group within the local authority, and that allows a lot of this to work really, really well. We seek to maintain partnerships and find ways of working to bring resources into Renfrewshire. And a lot of that bringing resources in comes through national funders and making sure that we're alerting our members to the potential of that. Thanks. Stuart, a number of you know Stuart Miller. 160 organisations attending his courses. I say his courses, he helps to support them and set them up and lay them out on our new wonderful groovy website that we've just launched as well. We've got 79 members who were supported with funding processes, bringing in, creeping up to that 500,000, 423k secured, and then there was 37 training courses provided. Now that was the pre-COVID figures. We have seen just as many people interested in training, even though we're not having it in Ferguson Park in our offices at the moment. We're having it virtually online, and Stuart and the rest of the team are kind of learning from that, and there's practice coming through how we deliver training and how we want to do that in the future. And I think there's actually potential benefits to be gained from that approach that's in place. Stuart's been very, very busy with grant finder sessions in the last few while. I say that, and I would expect it to be more resources being dragged towards Renfrewshire in the near future. Thanks, Cal. We do seek to make sure our voice of the network is heard and understood by decision makers and funders. We've mentioned the SPG, the Service Providers Group within health, which is really sort of, you know, really vibrant at the moment. And I think that aspect of the voice of the sector being heard loud and clear by strategists within community planning is really important. And I think it's something we've been quite successful at in Renfrewshire, all of us, in making that happen. We do that through things like the local area partnerships. There's 7 local area partnerships, and we have officers who go on each one of those, and that's a very community-led decision-making process involving councillors and local community members. We've mentioned the health and social care approach, which Francis has presented on today. We've got great relationships with the private sector through the Chamber of Commerce. Bob Grant there is a great partner to us, and we work closely with him. And then there's community planning itself. And this idea for me, partnership's a bit of a mantra. We talk about it a lot of the time. And in Renfrewshire, that's followed closely by relationship. We build up relationships, and actually in some respects the last 6 months I think relationships have been enhanced because they've had to be really tight. But I think Francis mentioned this, that wasn't just because of the COVID response. This is where we've been going. Relationship is just as important as partnership, if not more important. We support through community planning the Forum for Empowered Communities, which is a strategic group within community planning, and this is just a chance to say thanks to some of these partners here that are on the slide. The one that's missing from there that I haven't put on that joined us this year was active communities. I want to do so. My apologies to Susan because Susan's there. We've had a growing group who's moved through this forum, but over the years we've really benefited from the forum as being within community planning as a formal group. And again, you know, I make the case that in Renfrewshire that's slightly different from other local authority areas where a number of my colleagues don't necessarily have that kind of relationship with community planning across Scotland, but in Renfrewshire we've definitely benefited from those voices being loud and clear within the community planning process. So how is it working? Well, if you look at something like the Community and Voluntary Action Team mentioned there, Stuart and Alice and Ian, they all attend the 7 local partnerships along with myself and Karen, actually a couple of others, and they're there actually helping to set the priorities for some of those communities that they work with. The Tim mentioned the forum. We are dealing with isolation and social connections. We're looking at community asset transfers. There's falls prevention. Nicola from Roar is never off her case about that and how important it is. Nicola gets you standing up at meetings and thinking about what she really means in relation to what falls prevention is about. And then there's always a growing sort of need to look at the greener agenda within that as well. We've mentioned the Health and Social Care Strategic Partnership Group, Service Providers Group, sorry. Karen McIntyre co-chairs that. There's the Equalities Group, which is the DEAR, Diversity Equality Alliance Renfrewshire Group. And I mentioned at our AGM last year, there was a potential of a new Buddies officer. And in fact, we now have a new Buddies officer funded by the lottery, and that's our Gozie. And many of you already might have met Gozie Agwe, but she has come in at a time of crisis, joined us, been with us 6 months, and I've yet to meet her because I've only ever seen her through a computer screen, which is a shame. But having Gozie here has been really, really important to us in terms of supporting groups who are dealing with ethnicity, particularly during the crisis. So we're building on the foundations in some respects of the last 9 years. As we go into next year, that will be engaged at our anniversary, our 10-year anniversary. We launched on April the 1st, 2011. We'll go into 2021 and we'll have been operating for 10 years. And we do think we're kind of building every year and making the foundation stronger and stronger. We work to communicate the interests of our members within the community planning structure. We think that's incredibly important. We work with national funders. Karen McIntyre has been doing some amazing work supporting the second phase of the Early Action System Change Project. Future Paisley, cultural regeneration remains just as important as ever within Renfrewshire. And the Future Paisley branding, which was kind of launched in the last year, has been really important in terms of moving forward from the bid process and still continue to use culture to drive some of that social change. And we say they continue to develop health network in all sector groups and individuals in health in Renfrewshire. The health element is a golden thread that a lot of us are involved in, and it's great to see that developing, as we've seen from Francis today. I'm going to talk just a wee bit about some of the sort of aspects of working in the last 6 months, and this will be quite quick, so bear with me. But I just thought I'd put this. I'm a man for a quote. I like the fact Francis used a quote. It meant I felt I'm not in my own in this. I always like to get a wee quote in. Niels Bohr is a physicist. He said, "Every great and deep difficulty bears in itself its own solution that forces us to change your thinking in order to find it." And in the last 6 months, I think that has been the case. Things that would have seemed impossible just became, well, we need to do it this way. We need to do away with lots of concerns about how that application process would work. Just get it happening. You get your virtual working, get out your offices, get home, work out how to do it from there. And I think we've found solutions within the situation. And one of the things you know, I think it's worthwhile considering what you're asked about, how you need to find your own solutions sometimes as well. You mentioned Future Paisley. I don't know if any of you have heard the Future Paisley podcasts that were launched, sort of supported by Erskine Arts, community organisation, funded by the local authority, and it brought lots of different voices to the table. I was asked to take part in the first one, and I was asked to set up a recording booth at home. And I'm not very clever or anything like that, but I had to sort of work out some way of doing it. So if we can look at the next picture, next slide, Cam. That's me in my electricity cupboard with a few blankets, podcasting to the world at one point, you know. And I thought I'd done a brilliant job. I thought I'd done a fantastic job. And, you know, and look at that. I found my own solution of my own recording studio under the stairs. But the next picture will show you how bad my version was. The next picture, if we could just have it. That's inside that booth there, that wonderful piece of, I don't really know what it is, artwork I suppose you could call it, is that as a senior officer who operates a very, very well-known charity. And I'm going to tell you, Sharon Macaulay from the Star Project is in there, right? She set up her booth with a duvet and a drying rack. And I think if you took that on Dragon's Den, you could probably sell it to some of the music experts in the world. How to make soundproofing in your own home. So Sharon's in there, right? And Heather Case just put in the chat box, she's still in there, which is probably a good point. Anyway, so we do come up with solutions. We have to think a wee bit sort of outside the box or inside the duvet sometimes to get the solution. And we've seen that. Loads and loads of that happen in Renfrewshire. We've been so lucky. So if we go to the next slide. At the start of the crisis, there was obviously a lot of need shown up, and there had to be lots and lots of, I suppose, emergency funding put in place in order to sort of make things happen. And we found ourselves engaged, rushing towards certain things to sort of work out how to help, how to get that funding to some of the members. We ended up being assessors for what was called the Wellbeing Fund. We advised Resilience Fund applicants. Resilience Fund was really there to support those social enterprises and businesses. And we supported community anchor organisations delivering the Support and Community Fund programmes as well. I'll talk a wee bit of that just in a wee minute. Few examples here, and I didn't like actually picking examples from the network because there's so many, but there is a few I'd like to just to highlight the kind of breadth of work that's been going on. Roar were working in partnership with I Am Me, and they were putting cards and drawings into the groceries and deliveries and that they were taking out to older people who were shielding and everything else. There was a launch of that Jambo Radio. I mentioned Gozi earlier on, who was working with this organisation just as they launched a multilingual station based in Renfrewshire, promoting diversity, tolerance and understanding. And they actually went on to gain digital media training with the Renfrewshire Chamber of Commerce, and that was a course funded by Renfrewshire Council. So there's just a sort of, so all those wee things coming together there in the one package. Erskine Unite Against COVID-19, a food group that came out of the Community Council there. We've got links to the Community Council moving to become a community pantry. They've absorbed other areas as well into that piece of work they're doing. Kairos Women's Group went online immediately, started running kitchen, creative cafes, homemakers, teaching recipes, just a breadth of stuff. New Tannehill Centre in Ferguson Park, we're doing party packs and synchronised celebration events. And a gala in your garden approach, and that led to that. Well, didn't it lead, but Dartwood Crew were involved in that, and the legendary bingo bus of Dartwood Crew were on the telly, and a bingo bus that arrived in streets. It was amazing. And then we get Star, who ran a huge creative digital programme, emergency response, food, health, culture, whole breadth of stuff that was coming up. They're just some examples, and there's so many, many, many more. One I liked, and I've got a wee connection to the Dirty Feet Dance Company, who are part of Disability Arts Forum in Renfrewshire. They looked at this idea, and I thought it was so lovely. During Mental Health Week, exploring the possibilities of bringing the outdoors indoors. So many people shielding, so many people still shielding, that really look to culture to help them through their days. And there was some really rich stories around that. Irene McNeil, who supports the Disability Arts Forum, the great thing she said, creativity and culture brings inspiration, the motivation and the willingness to cope patiently during restrictions. So that idea that these services that were sometimes run virtually online could actually bring that sort of basically inspiration just to be a bit more patient. And we've all had to be patient. And then finally, I just want to talk a wee bit about the sort of aspect of the support and communities fund that was led to it was the community anchor side of things. You know, the Linstone Housing Association worked quite closely with us. They brought in 300,000 from the support and communities fund. And they ended up supporting 50 frontline organisations throughout Renfrewshire. The Housing Association, Community Anchor, State Responsibility, 50 frontline organisations, including people like Create Paisley, Paisley YMCA and Erskine Arts. And they felt that their approach, as I said earlier, was really about partnership with Engage and with the local authority. And Carol Gemmell, who works for the Housing Association, said this: "Our combined knowledge has created a formidable partnership." And I said to her I was going to steal it and I was going to put my own name in it, but I thought I'd better put Carol's name in it. But I love the idea of a formidable partnership. This is my final slide, really, and I think that that's always been what we're trying to achieve. And I think this year, a year like no other perhaps, that we've actually seen, you know, why the third sector is important, why volunteering is important, why those social enterprises and people working with groups around ethnicity and connecting to health is important. The Renfrewshire Third Sector Network, we plan, we work, and we try our hardest to make sure it's recognised, respected, and it's influential. And I'll just say, I think there's a thanks slide at the end. I'll say thanks. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
Alan, thank you very much, as always. A fantastic past year, with fantastic achievements all around there. And I think that formidable partnership, I think, is a lovely tagline for the work of Engage in many, many cases across the last year. So thank you for that. It just leaves me with the final part of the day is just to say a few thanks. You know, in particular thanks to Frances for her presentation earlier on. That's absolutely great. Thank you to Laura for taking us through the accounts. Thank you, Alan, for your presentation. Thank you to the team at Engage for organising today. Special word for Karen and the managing of the slides. That was excellent. But also, I think the final thing is to say a really great thanks to the 34 people that we had on at the AGM here today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for your continued support for Engage. And you know, the last thing is, we hope to see you next year in person somewhere in Renfrewshire. So thank you very much. And there's no, I was going to say safe journey home, but it's a safe journey downstairs or next door. Thank you very much.
Bring the pies, Alan.
Will do.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hello.